Preseason game number 1 is in the books. So what have we learned about the 2026 Minnesota Vikings? Welcome to the Vibe of the Vikings, where we catch the real feel for Minnesota Vikings football. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, and we've got a lot to talk about. First, we are part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. Go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter and YouTube at Grey Duck Sports. We are on TikTok at grey.duck.sports. And there you will find all of our podcast episodes, full length, as well as clips from every show and a series of shorts that we are working on throughout the calendar year. Again, that is at Grey Duck Sports on Twitter and YouTube and at grey.duck.sports over on TikTok. Well, preseason game number 1 is complete. The Minnesota Vikings beat the New York Giants 13-10 on Saturday. Kyler Murray does start. Most of the starters for Minnesota, including the entire offensive line, get some play in this game. Justin Jefferson, not one of those guys, but Jordan Addison was in there. Kyler Murray leads a field goal drive on the opening drive of the game. Then it is J.J. McCarthy's turn, and to put it mildly, J.J. had his struggles throughout the rest of this first half before finally it was Carson Wentz's time throughout the rest of the second half. But before that, there was a disaster for the Minnesota Vikings defense where a screen on 3rd and 20-some, maybe even 3rd and 30-some, goes for 40 yards, and a couple of plays later, a touchdown pass is thrown to Malachi Fields, who Randy Mosses himself over Ivan Pace Jr. in the back corner of the end zone. That puts the Giants eventually up 10-3 at halftime, but then Carson Wentz gets the team back on track. Not too often we're going to be able to say that again, so let's say it right now. He looked good. He was able to get the team into field goal range right away. The Vikings get an interception soon after. After kicking that field goal in field goal range, Will Reichard has not lost it. 55, 54 yards, whatever it was, nails it right down the middle. Excited to see a third season from Will the Thrill, as we affectionately call him. Then the next drive, Carson Wentz goes down the field, does get the benefit of some maybe iffy pass interference calls that keep the drive alive, but in the end, he hits Miles Price, who grabs it for a one-handed touchdown on a fade route to the back corner of the end zone. The Vikings defense dominates throughout the second half, holding the Giants scoreless, and Minnesota holds on for a 13-10 preseason win to open up exhibition play. That is the unofficial start to your 2026 Minnesota Vikings season, and hey, a W is better than the loss, even if in this case that win or loss doesn't mean anything whatsoever. But there was plenty that happened in this game that mattered, and a lot of those things had to do with the questions that we asked last week when we were talking about what the Minnesota Vikings needed to do in order not in order to win, but in order for us to have some confidence going forward into the 2026 season, or more specifically, what were things that we were looking at? And obviously, Kyler Murray was number 1. Let's talk about that, and let's start with the Kyler Murray's performance, because it was definitely a cameo, to say the least, but it still was his first time as a Vikings quarterback with real live reps against a different team in this new Kevin O'Connell offense. And he didn't have to throw all that much. First play is an outside zone run. We'll talk about that in a second. That picks up 18 yards. Second play, they go play action with a flood over to the offense's left side. You've got a running back in the flat. You've got a tight end coming on the over route, and then a wide receiver running a corner, as well as another wide receiver on a jet sweep action, setting himself on the right side for a screen or check down if all else fails. He goes to the flat, hits the running back. Good timing, good rhythm. Everything looks good there, but it is a short throw. You're not going to gain too much intelligence of how he will be throughout the course of the 2026 season from that one play. His next drop back is on 3rd and 7, and the best of his 3 throws from this game, he has a sail route on the right side of the play, as well as a curl next to it. And then on the backside, if all else fails, he has the split out wide receiver there running a dig so that he can come back to that on his third or fourth read, and a running back checking and releasing out into the flat. And the wide receiver that he throws to is Jordan Addison, who has the out portion, the first level of that sail route, or that sail concept. You have the corner going over the top of that, and then you have the out, and he throws to the out. And it is a throw with very good anticipation. It was a smart decision. It was, again, good timing. And it was a little bit low, but it really was the only place that Jordan Addison was going to be able to get it without the risk of a defender batting it away. So that was his best throw. It was highly anticipated, a lot more anticipation than we saw at any point last season, probably from J.J. McCarthy, who anticipation, to, again, put it mildly, was not his best attribute, among many other things that were not his best attribute last year. But in this case, on this throw, in this specific play, it was anticipation that got that completion, converted it for a first down, and then there was only one more Kyler Murray drop back, because it was 4 straight runs for Minnesota from there, and then Murray goes trying to hit Aaron Jones on a check and curl. He chips off of a edge rusher and then goes into the curl. Kyler Murray, again, good anticipation there, throws it before Jones is turning a little bit to the outside, but again, there was a defender with inside leverage crashing down on Aaron Jones at that point, and it was loaded and outside, and Aaron Jones kind of had to die for it and couldn't come up with it, so that was an incompletion. That was on third down. That was the field goal. Kyler Murray's day was done after that. And not much to take away from that outside of the fact that it looks like he's got some good anticipation. Now, on that last throw, that third down throw, there were some of the weaknesses that showed up on Kyler Murray's Cardinals film from last year, and that is a tendency to vacate the pocket when it does not need to be vacated. The offensive line on that third down play held up pretty well, and if Kyler Murray just continues to stay in the pocket and not vacate it by rolling out to his left, he's going to be able to hit another beat, and then he's got both a mid-level crosser coming into his purview, as well as a dig that is a couple yards deeper right behind it. That both of those, well, the first one wasn't open, but it opened up a window for the second one to be open. And if he just stands in the pocket a second longer, he's able to see that, you'd think, and hit that. But instead, he leaves the pocket a little bit early and opts to go with the throw over to Aaron Jones. That is probably the other concern, is everything, all 3 throws, very small sample size, albeit, were all the most conservative choice for Murray. It was, and granted, that's how the progressions, especially with flood, go. And on a sail route, is you are going to read from closer to the line of scrimmage to back, away from deeper downfield, because you're wanting to get the completion, you're wanting to get the yards. But each and every time he took the lowest level, the closest available receiver to throw to. Hopefully that doesn't become a trend. I don't think that was necessarily a trend with him in the Cardinals. The vacating the pocket thing, more so, yes, is something that we have to worry about. But just going to the first level receiver is not something that is going to make me terribly concerned, unless it becomes like Kirk Cousins late 2018, sort of only going to that first read, or Sam Bradford throughout the 2016 season after the offensive line got into like catastrophic injury after catastrophic injury. That is the book on Kyler Murray. And that is probably all we're going to see from Kyler Murray until game 1 against the Green Bay Packers. Not a lot to gauge from it, but at least it was kind of fun to see him work with the offense and see some of that anticipation that you hope rolls over into the regular season. But again, still leaves, I think, the Vikings season to be a little bit of a mystery. The second question we asked coming into last week's show, as we looked ahead to the second preseason game, was how would J.J. McCarthy look coming off of the news that he had lost the starting quarterback competition in training camp? How would he look? Has he made significant improvements? Are the mechanics that we have seen an improvement on in practice clips that have been able to leak past the vaunted Vikings security team now? There was a FBI partnership tweet, so I guess Kevin O'Connell is getting super paranoid right at this moment that folks are going to steal all the Vikings plays, or the Packers are going to see a couple extra things on film. I don't know. I digress from that to say that we hoped that J.J. McCarthy's mechanics would not break down when he's thrown into a live game situation. And, well, I'm not sure that the mechanics are the biggest negative from this game for JJ. I actually thought when he was throwing the ball, he didn't have that leg kick. He did not have that funky delivery. That was a positive. I would say most everything else about his game, save for a few things, was an overwhelming negative and has shown a lot of regression from the end of last season and especially from his first ever preseason game against the Raiders 2 years ago. It looks like two different quarterbacks. I'm not sure if that's a loss of confidence. I'm not sure if the injury that he suffered in the first preseason game left him that rattled. I'm not sure if he has just quit and doesn't care anymore now that he has lost the quarterback competition. I don't think he's that sort of guy, but you can't rule out the possibility. I don't know him on a personal level. But everything about his game, for the most part, was atrocious. And typically when I see an atrocious quarterback play on the broadcast angle, if I really want to dive deep into it, and I typically do for Vikings quarterbacks, I'll go into the All-22 and I will see, was it that bad? And typically the answer is no. The All-22 tends to be a little bit kinder to the quarterbacks, I think. Not in this case. In this case, the All-22 was a pure indictment on the lack of progress that J.J. McCarthy has made as an NFL quarterback. And this is coming from somebody who was cheering for J.J. McCarthy to win, who didn't want necessarily to bring in Kyler Murray, didn't necessarily want to bring in an actual competition for J.J. McCarthy because I wanted to see one more year from him. I was open to it, but it was not my first preference. And yesterday showed that I was wrong all the way throughout about that. If that was who he was going to be come this regular season, then it would have been an incredibly long season. And it is a massive step back from the final 4 games of last year. Let's just look at the very first play. This one is not his fault by any means. This is him probably making a strong, smart decision where Jayshwan Jones goes in motion, and it's supposed to be a jet sweep reverse. And he's supposed to get the snap as soon as Jayshwan Jones is about to go right behind him and then hand it off to him in one smooth movement. It's a tick late, whether that is the fault of the center, the wide receiver, or J.J. McCarthy calling for the snap a tick too late, or just the whole operation between guys from the third team in Jayshwan Jones, guys who were on the practice squad, and like second team centers like Michael Juergens. That is not necessarily something that you pin just on JJ. I think he made the smart choice after Jayshwan Jones had kind of passed him in not trying to give him the ball, but just holding on to it and trying to make the most out of it. And he did get 1 yard for whatever that is worth. They go for a run on 2nd and 9, and that leads us to a 3rd and 3 on his first drive with 4:37 left to go in the first quarter. And yes, here both Michael Juergens and Joe Huber struggle to block up front on the interior, but still kept a clean enough pocket. And what they're going to do is they're going to send one receiver in motion from the left side of the play over to the right, and that leaves one wide receiver isolated on that far left side. He's going to run a backside dig, and he's going to be the last guy in this progression. You're going to have a running back going into the flat to the left. You're going to have a slot receiver from the right running a drag across the formation to the left. You're going to have the far outside receiver on the right-hand side running a slant, which is coming underneath an out route from the man in motion. And what McCarthy does is he decides to go to that man in motion, Jayshwan Jones. And when he goes to Jayshwan Jones, he sails it over his head. And now there's miscommunication, not miscommunication, but there's some back and forth on Vikings Twitter and like in some of the film breakdowns I've seen from not necessarily from like the pros like JT O'Sullivan and Chase Daniel, but more from the amateur film watchers like myself, I guess, where they're like, oh, look, maybe he was supposed to run a corner out there. My issue with that is not necessarily the throw. I don't think that is a throw that you look at, and if you think with a critical football mind, you say that is just what he did last year, was sailing those balls all over the place. I think more than not, this was try to get it to him, but throw it in a place where only he could possibly get it. He wouldn't have been able to possibly get it on that out route. The first sin on this play is not committed by J.J. McCarthy. The first sin on this play is committed by Jayshwan Jones, who is the first read on this play. And when you are a wide receiver, you 100% have to time up your break on your route. You have to be at the top of the route, breaking to where you're supposed to go when the quarterback hits the top of his drop. And when J.J. McCarthy hit the top of his drop, Jayshwan Jones still was about a step away from the top of his route and 2 or 3 steps away from breaking his route to the outside. So the timing is all messed up there from Jayshwan Jones. That is not on J.J. McCarthy. What is on J.J. McCarthy is the process that he follows after that, where when he sees, because it's not always going to be perfect. Even when you have the first team out there, the operation is not always going to be perfect. A wide receiver might be jammed up a little bit more, and the timing is gone. If that's the case, you don't keep staring down that wide receiver and try to throw him the football anyway, and then have to place it over his head and throw an incompletion and force a punt. You go to your next progression. You go to the third progression if that's not there. And for J.J. McCarthy, the backside dig by Ty Felton was going to be wide open if he just hitched once, came off of that read, and looked to the middle of the field, looked to his second read. Because really you're only reading 2 different sides, because there's the strong on that side, and based on what you see from the defense, you can decipher who to go to from there. But in that case, it wasn't just Jayshwan Jones whose route timing was messed up. It was everybody on that side, it seemed, outside of the person running the drag route. I think the drag route is the last in the progression, so you're going right over to the backside dig on your first hitch off of the drop back. That's going to be open. That window is going to be there for you to throw a bullet to Ty Felton. And J.J. McCarthy instead decided to stick with the mistimed route where it is not in rhythm and made a throw that was over the head of the wide receiver, probably just because he didn't want to put the ball in harm's way. So that's the first J.J. McCarthy drive. Second J.J. McCarthy drive, first play, they get him to a player running a flat route, the tight end running a flat route. And this was good. This was a strong throw. My only issue was that when it was the first read on the play. And when you are going to throw to your first read, you throw as soon as you get to the top of your drop. You only hitch if you have to go to your second read. And J.J. McCarthy got to the top of his drop and hitched. So the timing was a little bit late and allowed the defense to collapse a little bit quicker onto the tight end after they were, I think, going into quarters. I don't remember specifically. But he makes a strong throw. It's not a difficult throw. It's into the flat. And there's still an issue of having that unnecessary hitch at that point in your drop back. Then 3 straight runs and a incomplete pass that was illegal contact, which was a good throw. Timing still a little bit not there. And following that illegal contact penalty, which gave Minnesota an automatic first down, with 10:21 left to go in the second quarter, there is probably the most egregious rep from J.J. McCarthy that I just did not understand. And it might have just all gone moot anyway in terms of the results, but that doesn't deny the process that got us there. Because Caleb Tiernan is going to get called for a hold on this play. So even if he completes the pass, if J.J. McCarthy, unless I guess he completes it earlier in the progression, which was an option, then it's going to be called back anyway. But you still, as a head coach, as a quarterback coach, as an offensive coordinator, are going to watch the film because J.J. McCarthy doesn't know that Caleb Tiernan's about to commit a penalty. He's going through his reads like it's a normal play. So just because the result isn't there, it doesn't mean that this play is a complete wash. You have to see what happens in it, even if in the box score goes down as a penalty on the offensive lineman. And what this is a pretty simple Y cross, which is going to be a play action, and you have essentially 2 receivers, one on each side, running different concepts. One is a deep clear route, and then the other from the opposite side is going to run a Y cross over to that same side of the field to occupy the vacated space. And then you'll also have tight ends, running backs, chipping, and then releasing to the flats, curls. In this case, they all went to different levels of the flat, so it kind of acted as a flood with the Y cross. On this Y cross, Miles Price is running open the entire time. And if you go back and you watch the film on the All-22, if you have an NFLpro.com, go to this play. It's 10:21 in the second quarter. And watch J.J. McCarthy look at Miles Price wide open. Keep running to the right. Look at Miles Price wide open again. Still decides to keep running. And finally, by the time he throws the football, the defender on the other side of the field is already closed in to Miles Price and is able to meet Miles Price right at the ball, right as the ball gets there. If J.J. McCarthy throws that football when he is supposed to in the progression, he was staring it down, so that tells me that was his first read all the way, and that was the only read he looked at, and for some reason was trigger shy, didn't throw it at any point, that is going to be a first down. And it is a simple concept, and it is a simple read, and it was wide open for him, and he didn't pull the trigger for reasons I know not. And maybe if he throws it right away, then Caleb Tiernan later on in this rollout by J.J. McCarthy doesn't get blown up and feel like he has to hold. And then the hold's just not even there in the first place. That was an egregious sin by J.J. McCarthy. Again, check it out. 10:21 left to go in the second quarter on a play that ended up going down in the score bucket. It was just a hold. It would have been, had the hold not been there, an incompletion, and it would have been completely at the fault of J.J. McCarthy. Next play, again, he goes to the flat, this time a flat wide receiver, maybe kind of like a little quick out, speed out maybe. And again, does the same thing where that receiver is his first read and gets to the top of the drop, hitches, and then throws instead of getting to the top of the drop, throwing to that first read. Again, if he's going to a second read, third read, yes, you're going to hitch off of those reads. Because that's just how all of the routes, the second read is designed to break once you hitch off of the top of the drop. The third, all of that. So on and so forth. But here, he hitches again. Still makes a really strong throw. It was a good throw. The release might have taken a little bit longer than you'd like, but he makes a strong throw, gets it over there, throws the bullets. He still has the arm. And then the next play, the next drop back is the fade. I don't know if it was a fade or a deep curl. And I saw some discourse about this on Twitter, but it's the one to Ty Felton, the Ty Felton drops. And there was one dude that said, well, this is a bad throw by McCarthy. They're throwing the go route, and Ty Felton has to turn around. It wasn't a go route, first of all. Watch the route. Learn the game a little bit more before you post boisterous wrong opinions on Twitter. And then somebody said, oh, well, actually, it's a back shoulder fade. And he's like, oh, well, if it's a back shoulder fade, then why is he throwing it to the inside leverage? I don't think it was a back shoulder fade. I think this was a designed route, or maybe it is a back shoulder fade where the quarterback is supposed to throw it with inside leverage, because this was not the only route that I saw. Sometimes it was targeted, sometimes not, but I saw this about 5 or 6 different times while I was charting this game, is a receiver kind of running like that back shoulder fade, but instead of turning to the outside, which you typically would on a back shoulder fade, they turn to the inside. So instead, I think it's just a deep curl where you're supposed to get your body in front of the defender and just box them out. So I think that was a good throw. That was probably J.J. McCarthy's best throw, best timing of the game. Whoever that person on Twitter was that said it was a go route, again, learn ball. But that was his best throw, and it was dropped by Ty Felton. And then that leads to a 3rd down and 20 at this point, where J.J. McCarthy, in a quick concept, just refuses to throw. Double slants on one side, single slant flat on the other, and then a running back curling out of the backfield. It's designed to get the ball out on the 3rd drop. You are supposed to quickly diagnose the defense and throw it to the slant that has the most space in between. It is not designed for you to hitch off of, because if you do, there's no chance that those plays are going to be open up. The defense on simple slant routes are going to be able to close on that pretty quickly. And he has the far slant route on his left side open because everyone's gravitating towards the slot slant route on that side. And it leaves a pretty nice window for the outside. And now it's 3rd and 20, so it's probably not going to pick up the first down anyway. But again, it's the process. A quick concept in which there are no second options after you get to the top of your drop. At that point, it's just a broken play, scramble, try to get somebody open. And again, J.J. McCarthy gets trigger shy. And that was just the theme. Even on the throw that he makes deep down the field to Miles Price. Miles Price makes a good catch. And Phil Simms in the broadcast, I'm in Arizona, so I can only watch the NFL Pro broadcast, which gives you the home broadcast automatically. And it was Phil Simms. And he's like, oh, whoa, that was a good throw. It was a good throw. The one over the middle to Miles Price on the deep curl over the middle, overball, whatever you want to call it. But it also was about an hour late. So it was a game marred by problem after problem after problem from J.J. McCarthy. And it represented a significant step back in the progress that I thought he had made at the end of last season. And hopefully we can eventually just see this as a one-off and he's able to have some good reps in game 2 and if he plays in game 3. Because we are still just a Kyler Murray injury away from J.J. McCarthy getting snaps again as the starting quarterback. And we've seen Kyler Murray get injured in the past. It's not out of the realm of possibility. There's a good chance that J.J. McCarthy still starts games for the Minnesota Vikings in 2026. And if it looks like that, then it might look worse than it did at any point of time last year, even the Packers game. Other questions that we asked, the run game. Are we going to get a sneak peek of that? I think to an extent we did. Minnesota ran a lot of outside zone. They set the tone early with that first play running outside zone with a fullback getting out in front and Max Bredesen to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones finds the right hole and gets 18 yards. Jordan Mason on his first outside zone attempt didn't find the right hole, got stopped. I think he just was a little bit too hesitant in his decision. You have to make your decision kind of on the first 2 steps of the outside tackle, the play side tackle, to whether you're going to keep going to the outside or you're going to bang it back up the to like the B or C gap, or you're going to cut it all the way back, bend it all the way back. Bounce, bang, or bend is like the running back coach read for it. And Jordan Mason just too hesitant, and it allows everybody to catch up to him, even though it was well blocked from the beginning. Jordan Mason, though, on his second outside zone run, does put his foot in the ground, cut back, makes the right decision, gets a pretty nice gain out of it. And we saw mostly outside zone. If that is going to be the only thing that Minnesota runs now with Frank Smith, I think I'll be a little bit disappointed because I didn't see the short motions that we saw in Miami. I didn't see a diverse package of runs like I saw in Miami, where they were doing literally everything and getting explosives with every single concept you could think of: duo, ISO, any other man zone, counter, power, outside zone, inside zone. They were getting big explosives on all of that, and they were, yes, relying more on outside zone, but kind of branching things off of that. I think that the Vikings are going to branch things off of that a little bit more once the regular season comes, but we at least get to see the standard vanilla outside zone get some success during the course of that preseason game. And then Carson Wentz was good. Sorry, I lost my spot. The young defenders was another thing that I was looking forward to seeing. Jacoby Thomas was injured. Caleb Banks, will talk about him in just a second. I did not think he had a very good game. Charles Demings was pretty good. He was targeted once in coverage and clicked and closed well. It was a curl route when he was playing quarters, so he's trying to get a cushion deep over the receiver to occupy that deep quarter of the field. And the wide receiver stops on a 6-yard hitch route. Charles Demings quickly closes the space. I think it still went for a first down, but Demings made the tackle. Otherwise, when I saw him in man coverage, he looked good. When I saw him in zone coverage, he went to the right spot. Which is all you can say at this point, and matched with the correct player that he was supposed to match with. So good from Charles Demings, nothing spectacular there. Dom Orange, solid game. At times was out of position, at times was pushed back, but I think had more good than bad throughout the course of this game. And then Jake Golday showed off his athleticism, showed off his versatility. Still, I wasn't like completely sold on all of the hype from training camp. I'd like to continue to see improvements in the technique. There were some good tackles, but there was on that screen, he is slow to react to it and doesn't necessarily come at the best angle. But I think my main takeaway is that I'm not completely buying all of the training camp hype. The training camp hype had me thinking that this was a 2017 Saints draft class. Except all on defense, and that all of these guys were going to be multi-time Pro Bowl players, or at least very, very good above average starters for 5-6 years in the National Football League. I have not seen that quite yet. I don't think it's super bad, but I don't think it is the ceiling that I was hearing from reports, not only from fans and not only from videos, but also from beat reporters coming out of training camp. It did not show up on the film in preseason game number 1. And then lastly, Ty Felton. We wanted to see if the hype from him in training camp was real. He had the drop. You don't love that. I do think the top of his routes, like Kevin O'Connell said, were pretty good. I do think he is dropping his hips a little bit more cleanly. Not a ton of his routes had a lot of stem to one side, head fake to out leverage your defender. I'd like to see a little bit more from that. Jury is still out on what I think of Ty Felton. I don't know if it is quite too like he's going to be the next KJ Osborne, but I did see some improvements with the nuances of his game. From that, we talk about the winners and losers from this preseason game, and I've alluded to some of them already, but one of the winners I thought was Myles Price, wide receiver that is already in pole position to make this team as a kick returner because he was able to win that job as an undrafted rookie last year and was pretty good at that job. I think he has a little bit more play as a receiver from scrimmage if called upon in a pinch or if we just need some depth. He is short. He is slight. But he has some good route running skills, some good cuts, and he's always going to be a player that his ceiling is going to be limited because of his size, but he maximized his catch radius a couple of times in this game. One with a one-handed catch, a couple just sealing off, boxing out defenders, and still coming up with a play even if they were coming over the top of him. As well as that, I liked his run blocking. There was a couple of times where he was called in close to the formation and had a block that helped either spring a running back or prevented a player from collapsing in on the run design from the backside. And the player that he reminds me of, and maybe it's just the number, I don't think it's just the number, I think it's the style of play and the size of player, Brandon Powell. Brandon Powell was called upon to be, in 2024, along with Tristan Sherfield, in obvious run plays where you still want to get two wide receivers out on the field. Those guys were brought in kind of like a run package. You knew it was going to be run unless Kevin O'Connell wanted to try and catch you sleeping and keep you guessing with a play action every once in a while. But Brandon Powell was a solid blocker. He was a wide receiver limited by his size, but could still make some decent plays. Never going to be a big game breaker, but a good depth guy. I think Myles Price can fill that role. I think he has secured a spot on this team. I liked what I saw from Myles Price more than what I saw from Ty Felton at this point. So if those two, I don't think they are, but if they were competing for one roster spot, I would give it to Myles Price right now. Number 2, Carson Wentz is a winner. I think that Carson Wentz was the best overall quarterback on the field for Minnesota, or for either of the teams, on Saturday. He went through his reads well. He made smart choices. He made strong throws. And that's about all you can ask for. If he continues to trend in this way, if this performance is the start of a trend upwards for Carson Wentz, and J.J. McCarthy's is a start of a trend downwards for him, then there's going to be serious conversations about who truly will be the quarterback 2 for Minnesota coming into the season. That's how down right now I am on J.J. McCarthy from this performance alone. I love J.J. McCarthy. I would never want Carson Wentz, in my wildest dreams, to be quarterback number 2 over J.J. McCarthy. But I don't think you have much of a choice if both of these players trend in the direction that their preseason performance in game number 1 would suggest they are going to start trending. Henry Bird, offensive lineman, also Walter Rouse. They were in the second and third team. They both played a couple of different positions, both as guards, both as tackles, and they didn't get beat. They held their own, which is more than we'll say for a couple of other guys. So I don't know if Henry Bird is going to make the team. I think Walter Rouse might have secured his spot with this game. I think Henry Bird was still an outside-looking in guy, but he at least strengthened his chances if he's competing against a guy like Joe Huber, who we'll talk about later. But for the offensive line, I think you have your 5 starters. I think you have Ryan Vandermark. the sixth offensive line from Buffalo. I think you have Caleb Tiernan, the rookie. Probably have Michael Juergens as your backup center. And then if you want to go 10 offensive linemen, I mean, that could just be it with the 8. But I think you save a roster spot for Walter Rouse, and if you want to go 10, then it is Henry Bird. I don't think I still don't think he'll make the team, but I liked what I saw from him in that game. Jacob Roberts was the linebacker that had the interception, but that was more of just being in the right place at the right time and having a bad quarterback make a bad read and just not see you. But the rest of his play, like when he was okay against the pass, it wasn't as great, even though he did have the interception. So that seems kind of contradictory to say. But there were some times where he didn't know exactly where he was supposed to be in a zone relative to the routes that were being run by the offense. He was spot dropping more than matching, or reading where the receivers were going. But against the run, he held his gap and he made some tackles. Not a big win, but a solid win. Ivan Pace Jr., I actually think was a big winner from this game. And I saw a lot of ill-informed takes on Ivan Pace Jr.'s play, where they were blaming him both for the bad angle on the screen and for giving up a touchdown to Malachi Fields. And it is like such a disappointment that people don't think football critically. Like they just come to these conclusions based on their own previous biases that just confirm. And that's not just for football. I guess that's for every single thing in life. I have had my ups and downs as Ivan Pace, and I've reacted how I think he has been playing at a given point in time. And I currently am coming from a place where I don't think he's going to have much play on the defense because I think he is a very limited player. But he won me back a little bit with his performance in this game. But first, let's talk about those two plays and why those are not worthy of really putting on Ivan Pace. The screen. The 40-yard screen on 3rd and 25. Ivan Pace did not take a bad angle. Ivan Pace got on one side of a blocked player and was expecting someone else to fill in on the other side of that blocked player. But that player was Jamal Adams. And Jamal Adams, for whatever reason, decided to run right into the person that was blocking the Vikings blocked player instead of filling in on the other side and just trapping the running back. I think it was it Singletary? I don't know for sure. Or maybe Tyrone Tracy, whoever. That was Jamal Adams taking the bad angle. Ivan Pace was in the right position, but he didn't have anyone covering the only escape route that running back could take off of the screen. Watch the film. You'll see it. It's clear as day. Jamal Adams is the one that screwed up right there. And then, yes, Ivan Pace was the guy in coverage against Malachi Fields. On a broken play, Ivan Pace was the one in coverage. He is a 5'10 linebacker going up against a 6'4 wide receiver with a vertical of 39 inches whose only discernible pro trait coming out of college, he's a rookie from Notre Dame, is his contested catch ability. It doesn't matter who you are putting on him if they don't have the size. That is not on Ivan Pace. That is just on the breakdown of the scramble play. There is no world in which you should expect Ivan Pace to actually be able to make a good play on that ball. He is already down 6 inches, and now you're expecting him to be able to make up for that with now like a 45, 46-inch vertical. Sonny Styles doesn't have a 46-inch vertical. And he has some of the best numbers that we've seen from a linebacker at the combine in years. If you were expecting Ivan Pace to make that play, then I just don't think you understand that not every player can make every single play. And yes, that's a weakness in his game, and it's why he's limited. But if you're blaming that on Ivan Pace, like, again, think critically about football. Because his run stopping was really good in this game. He was able to spin off of a couple tackles, offensive linemen, tackles, or guards, in order to make tackles. He was filling the gaps well. There were times where he wasn't doing that last year, and I think got a little bit too over-aggressive, and was oftentimes in the wrong hole, and that allowed some big breaks. There were times last year where he was in the wrong zone, but when he played downhill in this game, it was good film for Ivan Pace Jr. It was not the disaster class that Vikings Twitter would have you believe that it was. Zemaiah Vaughn, again, mostly in man coverage towards the second half of this game, so he's not going up against the top-tier competition, but I think he probably was the best cornerback that I saw in a long period, that played for a long period in this game. I also liked Elijah Williams as a disruptor up the middle. I think there is a lot of promise there, and I think Elijah Williams is going to get some more play and if there's a player that I think could take a Jalen Redmond step forward on this defense, my money would be on Elijah Williams. I really like the film that he put in, not only in this game, but towards the end of last season. And then finally, a guy whose name I did not even know of until after the game, when I first saw who is 59 making all of these plays in the backfield, and that is Bengali Kamara, who is a linebacker, 6'2", 6'3", 230 pounds, soaking wet, from Kansas. He's also played at Pitt. He's played at a couple of different places. He was an undrafted rookie. And oh my gosh, you talk about someone shooting the gap with regularity and timing the shooting of the gap just perfectly. That was Bengali Kamara. Just continued to do that. He was also good in the few times that he had to go back into pass protection. If you compare it to Jacob Roberts, there was a play where the Giants were running a mesh against a zone coverage, and when you're seeing that mesh come, you want to not widen out. You want to, on your side of the zone, wait for the crosser that's coming your way. You should be able to read that. Jacob Roberts did not attach himself to that crosser. Instead, he widened out, allowed that crosser to have a clean window, while the crosser from the other side was running into Bengali Kamara's zone, and Bengali Kamara, from at that point, matched up with that player and was able to wall him off. And forced actually a pump fake to that side because the quarterback thought that was going to be open, saw Bengali Kamara was right there walling it off, and then saw that Jacob Roberts had widened out too much, and there was a nice window for that other side, the other crosser, with that mesh concept. But Bengali Kamara there was only one negative play that I saw from him, and it is probably the play that might keep him from being a impactful NFL player, because he was doing all of this in the second half against third stringers, fourth stringers. And that is the size question. Granted, we've seen more athletic, smaller players in a Brian Flores system get some success, Ivan Pace being one of those. But Bengali Kamara, when he wasn't able to shoot a gap and actually had to go toe-to-toe with a real, true offensive lineman, got completely pummeled out of the play. So I don't know if his future in the NFL is long in the tooth, but I think he at least deserves, if we were judging whether he should have a roster spot based solely on the film from preseason game number 1, I would say absolutely yes. He shoots the gap against the run. He can be an excellent depth piece. I just don't know if the size plays at the NFL level. Maybe it does. Maybe Brian Flores can work around it. We'll have to see. I still think he's a long shot to make the roster, but I at least wanted to shout out the excellent performance. He was the best defender on the field for me by Bengali Kamara. And I should say best defender relative to who he was going up against. Obviously, all of the first-team defenders are more talented, and we're playing against more talented players as well. But relative to the competition that each were facing, Bengali Kamara was the one that stood out the most to me. Now let's go over to the losers. J.J. McCarthy. Ad nauseum of him already. We don't have to go into that. Xavier Scott. I don't necessarily think Damon Claiborne won running back 3 job. I don't think he had good moments. I don't think he had moments that set him apart positively, but I think Xavier Scott had moments that set him apart negatively. I think Xavier Scott had a really bad game in pass protection, didn't find the right holes to go through in his limited times running the football. And if you can't pass protect as the third running back on the team, you're not going to make it. And Xavier Scott was awful at it. Damon Claiborne can show that he can pass protect, or Max Bredeson. That gives Damon Claiborne a leg up, I think, right now. If it is a competition between Xavier Scott and Damon Claiborne to get that running back 3 spot on the Minnesota Vikings, I think it was already favored towards Damon Claiborne because he's the draft pick from 2026, even though he wasn't Nolan Teasley's guy. He was Rob Brzezinski's guy, or whoever else was in charge of making picks, I guess. I still think he had the outside edge coming into it, and the poor play from Xavier Scott pushed that edge further for Damon Claiborne. Joe Huber, really bad game. Caleb Tiernan, really bad game. Those guys were getting wrecked. Joe Huber to a fuller extent than Caleb Tiernan. Caleb Tiernan had at least some reps where he looked competent. But you need to put together most of your reps, 95% of your reps as a competent offensive lineman to have a future as an offensive lineman, at least as a starter in the National Football League. Otherwise, you're getting beat 20 times a game, and you're the sole reason for 20 pressures, which would be an unheard of number. Caleb Tiernan needs to show more consistency, needs to not just absolutely get pushed back against power. You bull rush him, and he is just like Bengali Kamara going up against a offensive lineman. He'll get pushed all the way back into the lap of the quarterback. Joe Huber, same thing. I did not see Joe Huber win a rep. That's how bad it was for Joe Huber. Jayshwan Jones, again, did not do himself any favors with the botched end around, which I think, again, you're not faulting completely him. You're faulting the whole offensive system, everyone that was out on the field, including Jayshwan Jones, but not getting out on your route on time. A couple of drops as well. I don't think Jayshwan Jones had a good shot of making the team anyway, but I think preseason game number 1 virtually locked him out of the final 53-man roster no matter what. And then I was not blown away by the third-string tight end battle between Urasek and Bartholomew. Both of those guys blew a lot of blocks. None of those guys did anything spectacular as pass catchers. Tight end number 3 might be Mr. Outside Hire or Mrs. Outside Hire. Yeah, true. That was an Office reference for anyone who didn't get that. Go watch The Office after this. Yes, tight end 3 would be Mr. Outside Hire somewhere. Not Urasek or Bartholomew if we were going, again, from just the film of this preseason game. Number 1, Caleb Banks, really bad game. Very, very disappointing, but not unexpected. I, in my report of him, have a wide range of outcomes of who he can be that kind of, if you go to the middle of it, if you average it out, he turns into a capable NFL starter. But really, he's only going to go to one of the two extremes, and that is a guy that will probably be not very playable at the NFL level and a guy that will be completely dominant. And at least on Saturday, he looked at the negative end of that spectrum. Just refuses to work on his pad level, refuses to play low, and doesn't matter your size. If you're not going to get your pad level, win the pad level battle and get lower than the offensive lineman that you're going up against, he's going to have all the leverage against you. He's going to push you back. And that pure athleticism just does not matter. You're going to get pushed back like Caleb Banks was time and time again in the run fit. And there were times where they just gashed Caleb Banks' side on the run, and there was nothing anyone else could do about it. There were a few splashes where, again, if he is able to get his quick first step down, he can shoot through a gap. But when it comes to going man-on-man against somebody, until he gets his pad level straightened out, and he even said this after the game, that he specifically mentioned his pad level being the major issue and why he wasn't able to have a good game. And knowing that that is something he needs to work on this week in order to get low and not play high. So that's talk. Talk is cheap. We'll see if he can put words into action, and we'll see if anything has improved in the next preseason game against the Ravens on Saturday. James Pierre, not a great first game. A guy that I really liked as a free agent because of his click and close ability, was a little bit slow on the click and close. And we mentioned Jamal Adams with the missed angle on that screen. James Pierre immediately following that also took an awful angle on that screen. So I did not like what I saw from James Pierre, and I also did not like, prior to the injury, what I saw from Jamal Adams. He did have that one run stop early on, but I think he was given a little bit too much of a leash to kind of go to whatever hole he felt like he needed to, and at times that meant he was colliding with a Vikings player that was already assigned to that gap. And I think that happened a couple of times, and then the misread on the angle on the screen also happened. He was a splashy player that made a bit too many mistakes and didn't have the athleticism from his prime to make up for those mistakes, at least from what I saw in this game. And that's all that we're going to see from Jamal Adams in his Vikings tenure, because Unfortunately, Jamal Adams, he suffers a quad tear, I believe, quad strain, something that's going to keep him out for the entire season of 2026. So that obviously sucks. It happens, kind of a non-contact injury on the Malachi Fields touchdown where he is in an underneath zone and kind of just trailing a receiver and just comes up limp. And sometimes that happens, and it is unfortunate for sure. I was excited to kind of see how Brian Flores would use Jamal Adams as a tool from his toolbox. Unfortunately, we're not going to see that now, and unfortunately, that could spell the end of Jamal Adams' career. So you hate to see that happen for a guy that had so much talent, was such a good player early on in his career. Would have been exciting to see him in the regular season with the Vikings uniform, but alas, it was not meant to be. Best wishes for Jamal Adams. The Vikings, after placing Jamal Adams on injured reserve, brought in a guy named Bryce Phillips, who was an undrafted rookie from this 2026 class. Don't have much film on him. Haven't watched a whole lot of him, but we will see him, assumedly, in the preseason, you'd think. We'll see if he can do anything for Minnesota, or if he will just be a guy that gets cut at the end of August, beginning of September. And that is all the takeaways I have from preseason game number 1. Preseason game number 2 is going to be another Saturday at noon contest against the Baltimore Ravens. The Vikings will also have their joint practices this week against the Baltimore Ravens. Try and see if you can scrounge any film of that. Fight the man, fight the power, fight the Vikings security guard and their FBI allegiance in order to get this film smuggled like we're running moonshine in I don't even know if that's the right term. I wasn't from the 1920s. Like we're running moonshine from the during the Prohibition era. That's how we need to treat this. We need our own Al Capone, less violent, not killing anybody, but an Al Capone that can get us through Prohibition of the film, nonetheless. Metaphor is collapsing in on itself as I try to stall for time to find the exact right button that I need to go to here before ending out our show. But the things I'm looking forward to in that game, I want to see if J.J. McCarthy has made any sort of improvement. I want to see if Carson Wentz continues on his upward trend, a continued quarterback 2 battle, which I think we are now in between those two guys. I want to see if Damon Claiborne can solidify himself as running back number 3 and pull away and not just be the beneficiary of Xavier Scott falling back to the pack. Then I also want to see if Caleb Banks has stayed true to his word and worked on his pad level. I'm going to look for that specifically. And if Jacoby Thomas is able to play, I also want to see if he is living up to the hype as one of those 5 defensive players that we have called into living up to the hype. I also want to see a little bit more from Ty Felton. Hopefully we see a lot from him because I did not get enough. It was inconclusive from this first game to see whether or not he has taken those jumps. I saw signs of it. I also saw signs from last year. I'm still not exactly sure who Ty Felton is in 2026, but that is what we are going to be looking for in this upcoming game. And that is going to be the vibe for tonight and for this week. Thanks for tuning in and riding with me on the Vibe of the Vikings. Hit the follow, drop a rating, and keep spreading that purple energy. We'll be back next week to talk about preseason game number 2 and to check the vibes again. Until then, stay loud, stay loyal, and skol.